goodness. We haven't even started and I'm already about to lose it. Hey, good morning, my love. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good afternoon to some, wherever you are in the world. Hello. I am Coach Yolanda, owner of Evolving Spirit Wellness, and I'm just so glad to be in front of you and to be hor- not horizontal, to be vertical. To be vertical. I am just happy, happy, happy. I saw your comment before I even came on, and I had to pause. Good morning, good morning, good morning. How are you? This seems like it has been such a long time, and oh my gosh, hey, my love, and I'm just give me a moment. Give me a moment. Even though I've been preparing all morning, I still feel like it's been so long since we have been together. I'm not quite sure where to start, where to go. I have notes and books and things everywhere to support me, but the greatest support comes from you. And I am so humbled and appreciative for those of you who reached out to wish me well while I was sick. For those of you who knew something was going on without me even saying, because where's she been? What's going on? I thank you. I thank you. I thank you. And I love you. So, the last time we got together, we were doing a recap of the developmental stages that we had already gone through since the beginning of this year. Now we are in the month of August. The good thing is we can take our time. We don't have to rush through because the developmental stages that we are in now and the ones that we will cover in the future are really present day. You know, we today we're going to talk about 21 to 35. For some of us, we are still there in that age range. And for many of us, it does not feel like it's such a distant memory, and so we can take our time. We don't have to rush through these last couple of stages. You will notice that the developmental stage, the years become more and more stretched out. When we began, it was, birth to 18 months, 18 months to 3. Now we're talking about 14-year spans, and a lot can happen in that frame of time. And so let's take our time. I don't want to rush just because we're coming towards the end of the year. I don't want to rush just because my business is transitioning. If haven't heard, I am slowly transitioning my business into whatever I desire it to be. I am no longer doing one-on-one coaching, but we will grow and transform together. That is my thought process. That I'm not going to dictate the way that it goes and the way that it looks, that I am going to listen to where I am necessary and needed. And one of those places, for those of you who would love to come to the city of Wilmington here in Delaware, where I am located, I'm located in Newark, Delaware. And I want to make sure that I shout out a nonprofit organization. I have their shirt on this morning. Let me lower the camera so you can see my Black Mothers in Power shirt. Every fourth Tuesday, I facilitate a support group called Real Talk Sacred Womanhood. If you are in the area, go to blackmothersempower.org and register. You have to be 18 years or older to participate, but I would love to see your face. I would love to gather with you wherever women are gathering. It's going to be a good place to be, not just for healing, but for connection and support. And we're going to talk about, and that's why it's called Real Talk, what it means to be a woman, how our womanhood is expanding, how it is changing, and why it has to remain sacred. So if you are in the Wilmington, Delaware area, or you want to travel to, please go to Black Mothers in Power. This is their shirt. I love it. And blackmothersempower.org and register to join us every fourth Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Every second Saturday, I am also at Black Mothers in Power for childbirth education classes. For those who are thinking about conceiving, for those who are in their first, second, third trimester, it does not matter where you are along your birthing journey. Come on out to the childbirth education classes so we can support you and your partner in that journey as well. And both of those classes take place at Black Mothers in Power, located in the beautiful city of Wilmington. Now, we are going to talk about intimacy. And in full disclosure, I may not be the greatest authority on talking about intimacy because it is a principle and a practice that I am still learning. I am still growing within it. I am still seeing what my relationship with intimacy is. But certainly, hey, Miss Rachel Brown, hello. Certainly, it is something that anyone who considers themselves to be a seeker and receiver of love, you better have a good relationship with intimacy. And most of what we have learned about intimacy comes in that 21 to 35 year age range. When you're in your 20 somethings and your 30 somethings, you really get an education on intimacy. Now, the beginning of that developing skill happened so long ago from birth, even before birth. However, your caregiver felt intimate sharing with you, your earliest lessons on intimacy. A lot of times we, mirror that same type of behavior, because life can teach you and people can teach you one or two things, what to do or what not to do. So if you grew up in an environment, Marissa, listen, I said that to myself, like, I don't know if this is what I want to talk about because even with this illness, it really demonstrated to me what my relationship with intimacy is, what I thought it was, what it really is, and what is developing. But if you, again, are looking to have a full life that is filled with love and great experiences, then you gotta look at what is your relationship with intimacy. And so I have, of course, some resources that we're going to read from because I believe that we all would be served well by some dismantling of whatever the definition of intimacy is for us. And if you'd like to share, put it in the comments what you believe intimacy is. Many of us believe that it has to have a physical or sexual connotation. You may have thought that in your 20s and your 30s, but for those of us who are beyond that age range, hopefully life has shown you that intimacy is so much more than the physical. It is a spiritual practice, it is a spiritual principle. It doesn't mean that the physicality of life does not also contain spirituality and intimacy. That's a discussion for another day. I could talk about that all day. We are talking about what is our relationship to being vulnerable, to being open. Okay, Marissa says intimacy, trusting someone to care for your soul. Ooh, I love that. Hey, my love. It's much deeper than the physical. It is letting someone in your soul. I love that you both mentioned the soul because it really is a soul connection. I also know that we need to talk about what is our own personal relationship with intimacy. Because one thing I know to be true, and there may not be a lot of things I know to be true, but one thing that I know to be true, if you are looking for someone else to provide a level of intimacy for you, then you become dependent upon them to fill your intimacy cup up. And so Rachel says intimacy for her is a time or setting where people can be vulnerable from a place of love. Oh, I love that definition. I love it. I love it. I love it. And so for a very long time, for me, I thought intimacy meant that I got to share everything about me and that the other person would reciprocate and share everything about them until I realized that the deeper meaning for me in intimacy is how am I seeing myself And how am I expressing that to the world? What is my capability of being so authentic, so vulnerable that I don't care what the risks are? I'm not looking to gain or get anything. There is not a requirement, at least for me, that someone else reciprocate in intimacy and vulnerability. It is a state of being that I desire to be in at all times, to be open, to be willing, to have my heart be so wide open that I'm going to receive all of the good things. Also recognizing that that means that I may be putting myself at risk. And we'll talk about how do we get from a place of worrying about the risk to being open to what will come. Now, I'm going to read Webster's definition, my little crooked glasses, Webster's definition of intimacy. And if this is the definition that some of us have, then we can understand why it's difficult. Well, I'm going to look up vulnerability because, of course, the Webster's definition of intimacy had a physical connotation. We're going beyond that. We are going beyond that. So, the definition, did I not turn to it? For vulnerability. And for me, again, when I read this, it makes me not want to participate. Capable of or susceptible to being wounded. Now, if that is the definition of being vulnerable, that you could possibly be wounded, then why would you want to participate? Other definition is open to or defenseless against criticism or attack. That doesn't sound fun at all. That makes vulnerability and intimacy sound like somebody's going to get you and you have to be prepared for it. You have to be on defense. And I know for many of us, based upon our experiences with connection and our relationships, we have learned to go into survival mode at all times, keeping our head on a swivel, looking for the red flags, looking for the next shoe to drop, looking for someone to hurt or to harm us. And if you've lived long enough, you know that's no way to live. Always having your guard up means your nervous system never gets to rest. Always having your guard up means you're always looking at people as potential threats and harm. And it also means seeing yourself as weaker than you probably are. I don't ever want to think of myself as not being able to defend myself, but I also don't want to be on defense at all times. That's a heavy, heavy burden to carry where you're always looking for something to hurt or harm you. And what comes from that and comes out of that is a lot of insecurity. How can you feel secure when you're always thinking that something or someone is going to do some damage? Now, when you're in your 20s and you're in your 30s, for many of us, that's when we're getting into deeper, intimate relationships, romantic relationships. Our friendships become, hopefully, a lot more stable, and you look to your social groups to support you as you are growing. And you get a little bit older and you realize just how fun it can be to be isolated. But when you're in your 20s and your 30s, that's when you're developing your sense of who you are. Many of us are going off to college or finishing up college, finishing up our education, starting a career, starting a family. And if those are things that you've never done, how do you know whether you're doing it right or wrong? A lot of about our life at that time is about discovery, discovering who we are, how we relate to one another. And most of that feedback comes from our relationships, whether they are romantic relationships, family relationships, friend relationships, your relationship with your work, with your career, with your educational pursuits. A lot of our self esteem and value is built into those connections. And so, if you don't have a strong sense of self, you will look to your connections and relationships to determine who you are. A lot of individuals are still trying to figure out who they are in that age range. And you might be adopting the personality of those you admire or people who inspire you because you're still trying to figure out. How many of us, when we were in our 20s, would get into romantic relationships and all of a sudden we start to like the thing that the person we're connected with likes? because we believe that that's what relationship is. I've got to connect with you. So even if you're doing some things that I don't really like, I'm going to pretend to like them, or I'm going to, you know, mesh myself into your world, and hopefully you will do the same to me. We go off to college, and we may not be really sure of who we are. We knew who we were in our small town, or even if we lived in a city, we understood the ins and the outs. And now we're in a totally new environment with totally new people. We're trying to figure it out. We don't have the supports that we may have had back at home, where we felt safe, where we had established social groups that understood us. Now you got to start that all over again. Yes. Start talking like them, you start dressing like them. You know, you forget about your friends, your family, because you want to be with their friends and their family, because you want this relationship to work. And that's what we learn, that in order for relationships to work, we have to adopt and adapt to our environment and our surroundings. Same thing that when we enter into new social groups in your 20s and your 30s. Maybe you're with a group of individuals that you like, but there might be some things about them that you don't like, but you find yourself slowly starting to do some of the things that they are doing. All of my children right now are in this age range. And so I'm seeing how their social groups are playing out. And I can remember, because been watching them closely, how they were as teenagers to how they are developing as young adults, and how those relationships that used to be oh so important to them don't seem to be as important because they are changing. And that happens to all of us because we're trying to figure out, who am I? And sometimes we will operate at extremes in this age range. We either always want to be with our social groups, we always want to be with people, we always want to be connected, or we want to isolate ourselves because maybe we don't feel like everyone else. We haven't found our tribe yet. Many young people in this age range feel like they must isolate themselves because they haven't yet found their tribe. It's so much easier when you're a teenager and you're younger to develop social groups. The older you get, it becomes that much more difficult because you are evolving into an entirely different person. You are figuring out, separate from your family structure. You are figuring out what matters to you, what things you like. You're getting to explore this brand new world all on your own. And based upon the relationship that you've had with your caregivers, you either are looking to explore or you're keeping yourself very limited. I laugh sometimes when my adult children will call me and ask me questions about how do I do this and how do I do that. And I'm like, you haven't figured that out for yourself yet? Or even if they have figured it out, they may still call to get reassurance that this is the right thing to do. And oftentimes I will tell them, you've got to figure out what's right for you. I can't tell you that. Because if I'm telling you this at 25, trust and believe I'm going to be telling you at 26, 27. I need you to start to develop a sense of, who am I? What do I like? What do I love? What things make my heart sing? And am I willing to express them? And so that definition from Webster's sounds like nothing anybody wants to be a part of. Why would you want to be vulnerable if you know that's going to open you up to possibly being hurt or harmed? I think it is time for a new definition. And so, again, I may not be the authority on intimacy because I am still evolving, but I've had such an education over the past decade in terms of, who am I? What's my relationship to being vulnerable? How comfortable am I being vulnerable? And what does intimacy really mean? And as our my dear love says, it's deeper. It's deeper than the physical. It is letting someone into your soul. But what if you don't know what's in your soul? What if you haven't connected to your soul? What if you are still trying to figure out what that even means? And so, one of my favorite books, The Spirit of Intimacy by Sonobofu Some, Ancient African Teachings in the Ways of Relationships. And it's not just relationships in terms of the romantic sense, it's the relationships that we create with everyone, whether they are, family, friends, co-workers, even strangers. We are all in some form or fashion in relationship with one another. We have relationship. Before I came on and I saw who was already logged in, that did something for me. It did something to me, and does something for me. What is your relationship with being comfortable, with being connected to other people? And so, one of the things about this book that I love is she's very honest. Now, Madame Some has is with the ancestors. She passed away quite some time ago. But what I love about this book, yes, we want to focus on intimacy with ourselves. What I love about this book, in the introduction and the foreword, it says, hey, this is not a definitive case on intimacy, but it is hopefully something that will support you in redefining what intimacy means for you. And in the foreword of the book, there are two sentences which I've highlighted because it has supported me in looking at intimacy in a different way. Intimacy is not designed or encouraged for the achievement of personal happiness. I am going to read that again. Intimacy is not designed or encouraged for the achievement of personal happiness. Rather, it is for the fulfillment of one's life purpose, for the enrichment of the village community, and for the expression of spirit. It is a means of offering the gifts you carry. So, in order to practice the principle of intimacy, number one, you got to know who you are and know that you have special and unique gifts within you that deserve to be shared, not just with one other, but all, everywhere you go. Carry the spirit of intimacy with you because there is something grand and great within you that the world needs or would not have been given to you. The other part of this statement is that it's for the enrichment of the village. We need each other. Whether we believe it or not, whether we learn that in our 20s or 30s or not, we need one another. We need one another to be authentic. We need one another to be loving, to be kind, and to be the best versions of ourselves that we feel that we are. Doesn't mean that you always got to be rainbows and sunshine. It means no matter what my state of being is, I am connected to it and I'm willing to share. Because when I am willing to share what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling, it may give permission for other people to do so. Doesn't guarantee that it's going to happen. But other than that definition from Webster's that says I'm always going to be on defense, I'm always going to be open and willing, because what would life look like if we were all just limited and short with one another and not telling the truth? We've had way too much of that. Way too much of not telling the truth to one another about how we feel, about how we love one another, or about how we're upset, how we're angry. We've been holding on to so much that we don't even know when it's appropriate to share. And so intimacy is not, I'm going to tell you all my business. You get to know everything about me. Intimacy is whoever I am at any given point in time. That is how I'm showing up. And I'm willing to show you who I am and what's in my heart. And as many of you have said, what's in my soul. Not because I want to gain favor with you, not because I want you to like me, not because I want to, get brownie points or I want you to think particular things about me. I really don't care how you think about me. I want you to see me. I want you to hear me in my true self. And it's very challenging to do that if you don't have a relationship with intimacy with yourself. If you're not telling yourself the truth, if you're not connected to your own feelings, how are you expressing them to other people? How do people know the real you? And so, this developmental stage, 21 to 35, there's a whole lot of pretending that goes on. We want to show up in the version that's likable. We want to people please. It's something that we learned in childhood. How do I get my needs met? By being nice, by being kind, by being, helpful to everyone I come across. And I'm not saying that those are not great qualities to have. Are they authentic to who you are? All of the overthinking, all of the people pleasing that we do in our 20s and 30s is still showing up for many of us in our 40s, our 50s, and beyond. I will say that as someone who is happy to be over the age of 50, the older I get, the more I recognize that it's not necessary for me to run around people pleasing or worried about if people like me or what I need to do to gain favor with people. I recognize the older I get, the less I think about that. But when we are young, when we're 20 and 30, that weighs heavily on us. It really weighs heavy on us. Marissa says that reminds her of being in a toxic job where you were disconnected from yourself and had trouble connecting with others. It gets in the way when we are so busy on defense, in survival mode, looking for the next threat. Nervous system all over the place, hormones all over the place, stress level elevated. And we're trying to navigate all of that. It is very difficult to be connected to yourself, how you feel. And if you feel like you're in an environment where you can't express it, it's almost as if you are not being seen as human. One of the other places that I have found language that is helpful to me in terms of intimacy, of course, is my copy of All About Love that we read last year. And there were many times in this book where I felt like Bell Hooks, God rest her soul, was talking to me directly because I know this behavior. And what Bell Hooks says, and this again does not have to just be in a romantic context. It can be in any place you are in relationship where you are not feeling like you are your true self. Bell Hooks says, I wanted to know love, but I was afraid to surrender and trust another person. And so, as Marissa was talking about being in a toxic work environment, if you're in a toxic work environment, you're not trusting anyone. You may have seen things or experienced things where people have been dishonored, thrown under the bus, not valued. And so your ability to trust other people is impacted. So Bell Hooks says she wanted to know love, but was afraid to surrender and trust another person. I was afraid to be intimate. By choosing men who were not interested in being loving, I was able to practice giving love, but always within an unfulfilling context. And how many of us go to our jobs every day and we love the work that we do, but we can't stand the environment that we are doing it in? And it's so easy for us to be good at our job, but also hate the environment that we are in. Many of us are in relationships where we honestly love people, but we can't stand the environment that we're in. The state of that relationship weighs heavily on you. And you're like, but I love this person, but they hard to be around. How many of us are in relationships, whether it's romantic, family, friends, where you got to take time to get yourself together before you can even be in that person's space or in a space like your family? You know, you might be invited to the Labor Day cookout, but you've got to prepare yourself to be in the environment. And you tell yourself, but I love these people. I really do love them. But being around them taxes my nervous system, makes my brain feel like it's going to explode. And that is what Bell Hooks was talking about. Now continue. Naturally, my need to receive love was not met. How many of us are in relationships where we are giving, 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 and not receiving? I got what I was accustomed to getting: care and affection that was usually mingled with a degree of unkindness, neglect, and on some occasions, outright cruelty. How many relationships do you have in your life right now where it's good when it's good, but when it's bad, it's really, really bad? And as she says, outright cruel sometimes. At times, I was unkind. That was a revelation for me. It was a revelation for me in my relationships how unkind I could be. It took me a long time to recognize that while I wanted to know love, I was afraid to be truly intimate. Many of us choose relationships of affection and care that will never become loving because they feel safer. The demands are not as intense as loving requires. The risk is not as great. So, what's interesting is that for many of us, when we're younger, we out here being risky all the time. We fall in love quickly. We get into friendships very quickly. We say yes to jobs that we haven't really vetted, all in the hopes of this is going to be great, this is going to be wonderful. And what starts to happen is this pattern of expectation that this thing is going to be the great thing that I've always dreamed of, hope for. And then when it isn't, we start to lose that ability and capability of being intimate, of trusting people. This is the age range where we are willing to trust and then it can get damaged. And then we start to close in the walls. We start to build the walls up higher. We start to tell ourselves, not doing that. It's like I want to put my toe in the water, but I'm not going any higher than above knee level. So we can get into relationships and it can feel loving. And when it's good, it's really good. And that's why sometimes we only focus on the physical because we might be getting affection, we might be getting care, but are we truly, truly, truly connected in a way that you feel like you are the best version of yourself, that you're not pretending, that you're absolutely authentic, and that you feel like you can be vulnerable? For many of us, we can be in relationships and only show a certain side, only give people a certain percentage of who we are, the parts that feel like they are acceptable. And maybe you've been in a relationship with someone and you showed them part of yourself. It wasn't received well, so you pulled back and you started to tell yourself, yeah, that's just not a part of me that I can share with this person. So, why are we in relationships, whether it's family, romantic, work, or any other relationship where you can't be your full self? What is the point of that? Because it's something that we learn when we're younger. Children learn very early how to get their needs met is equal to how agreeable can they be. Kids learn very, very young that if I behave a particular way, it makes the people who are responsible for taking care of me upset. And then they don't treat me the way that I want to be treated. So I have to learn to be agreeable. By the time you get to be 21, you've learned that lesson over and over and over again. And so if your parents say, we want you to do this thing, you're like, yep, that's what I'm going to do because I've learned to be agreeable. Sometimes we tell ourselves it's easy for me to just go along than for me to get my needs met. And that is one of the saddest betrayals that we as human beings can do to our soul and our spirit. That I'd rather just go along than to have to fight to be seen and to be heard. And so when I ask the question, what is your relationship with intimacy? What is your relationship with intimacy with yourself? Are you telling yourself the truth about the relationships that you're in? Are your needs not being met? And if they are not, then you have to ask yourself, why do I continue to engage? Or why haven't I had the conversation where I'm asking for what I need and having the types of conversations that lead to support, love, honor, and all of those things? Y'all remember my list that I always like to pull out. I'm going to take a picture of it and post it at some point. This list actually started to get generated from All About Love, when I had to get very, very clear about what is my definition of love? What does it contain? What is necessary for me to call something love? These things and oh so much more have to be present. I don't want a top five. I don't want two. I want all and then some, because love has no limits. So why would I be okay with, well, I may not have the most trust in this relationship, but at least I get some affection. Or I may not be clear about what the context of my relationship is with this person, but at least they do things for me. Mm. I may not feel at peace or free all of the time in this relationship, but at least I get to have some fun. Why would you want to settle when it comes to love? The most powerful energy that is ever present, and you want to take bits and pieces of it? I want the whole thing authentically. That cannot happen if I don't have a good relationship where all of these things are present within me. And one of the struggles that I had in my 20s and my 30s, and hell, even up to my 50s, was expecting other people to provide these things. So when I asked what your definition of vulnerability and intimacy is, and we framed it in terms of another person, it's interesting that we didn't start with ourselves. Intimacy is about how you see yourself, how you view yourself, how you value yourself. How open and vulnerable and willing are you with you? Are you telling yourself the truth? Do you trust yourself? Are you affectionate and caring in such a way that even if it is absent, meaning it's not in a relationship because maybe you're not in that type of a relationship right now, but you don't feel like you're starving? Because for many of us, that's how we get into these relationships very quickly, because we feel like we've been out in the desert without a drink of water, and here comes something that looks like it's going to quench our thirst. If you are not giving it to yourself, why would you expect someone else to give it to you? That's how you can also get into what we often find in our 20s and 30s, that manipulation. It's like he or she or they are the greatest thing since sliced bread. They're human. They're human. In this, in my current romantic relationship, we were having a conversation the other day about how are you sure? How do you know that this is what it is? And for me, knowing what my insecurities are first is where I had to go to do my healing. I could not expect someone else to provide that for me. I had to heal those insecurities. Now, my main insecurity, there are others, but my main insecurity is not enoughness. That is the thing that takes me down and takes me out of most of the things that I would love to do in life. Feeling like I'm not smart enough, good enough, I don't have the resources that I need, just not enoughness, lack. And so what I've done in my relationship with God is to get very, very clear that God would not do that to me. God would never leave me without anything. And so that's how I combat the insecurities when they rise up. And I take ownership and I say, that's not God talking, that's me talking. The little me, the inner child me that thought she could not do or did not have or wasn't shown how to develop particular things. God wouldn't do that to me. And so as I'm having my conversation with my beloved about being sure, being clear, being absolutely 100% without fail, knowing that this relationship is it for me because I trust God. I don't believe that any relationship that has ever come into my life did not come from a source that wanted me to see something, hear something, learn something. And even if those relationships, whether it be romantic, family, or otherwise, even if those relationships did not work out or caused me some heartache, it never took me to a place where I could not be restored. So even if this current relationship, something happens, I always say I've had my heart broken in ways that I can't even express. And I've been restored and I'm still being restored. That's what keeps my insecurities at bay. I have been restored so many times over. And I always feel like it's a different version, a higher version, a more elevated version. It doesn't mean that I'm inviting heartache and woundedness and all of the things that vulnerability may make you more prone to. It's the thought, the feeling, and the wisdom that I have gained that says, baby, you could be restored from anything. Is it worth the risk? And for me, Love is greater than any risk that may happen. Somebody might hurt my feelings. Love is greater than that. I could lose all of my money. Love is greater than that. I could be embarrassed. Love is greater than that. So I'm going to always, 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 always have the ability to be authentic, even if the risk is high. It can't be higher than love. And it can't be higher than the relationship that I have with myself and my co creator, the God of my understanding. And so the types of resources and supports that I have gathered to support me are not just coming from books. It comes from being in the relationships, opening myself up to and being willing to be in relationship with other people. You know, based upon what we see and what we hear, it sounds crazy to want to be in relationship with people because humans are unpredictable. Things always happen that are beyond our wildest imagination. So why would we want to be in relationship? Because it's what we are designed for. Just as it said in the introduction, being in connection with another person is a sacred act. And who doesn't want to be in the midst of something sacred, something transformative, something that is so connected to spirit that it elevates you, it increases your wisdom. Whew. And there are times when, as an introvert, I feel like I want to be by myself. This past illness that I had, where I was isolated and by myself for about a week and a half, I was like, this is all right. Like, nobody's asking me for anything. Nobody is, requiring me for anything. I'm not responsible for anything. I started to get a little comfortable. And then I realized this is not the type of life I want to have. I love connecting with other people, I love seeing other people. I love giving of myself. I love receiving what other people have to offer because intimacy is not designed for the achievement of personal happiness. I'm not here to make you happy. You're not here to make me happy. I am happy, and I want to share that with you. Intimacy is for the fulfillment of one's life's purpose. You have to know who you are. You have to know what your relationship with intimacy is with yourself in order to share that and to receive it. You got to know. And so it's great and it's grand to talk about intimacy with another person. But all of those things that you would expect from another person, do you give them to yourself? Because I'm telling you, when you're in your 20s, in your 30s, you are prone to operating in the extreme. And what that looks like is either so isolated that you're trying to do everything by yourself. You don't need anybody's help. I don't need this. I don't need that. You might be a little bitter and surly, or you are so needy and attached to other people that it goes beyond codependency. How many of us can remember relationships that we had in our 20s where we felt like we were going to die if we weren't with the other person? We needed to know where they were. We needed to know what they were thinking. We needed to just be around them all the time. Those dangerous attachments to other people, places, and things that's feeding your brain and telling you that this is where your value comes from, your connection to this person or this thing, instead of knowing it for yourself. It's a dangerous, dangerous place to be in. There can be a healthy blend of the two where you are good by yourself, but you are good with other people. And so when you find that you are having trouble connecting with other people, you have to look at what is your relationship with yourself. It's not the other people. It's what's going on in here, in here, in here. We were all spot on when we talked about our soul. If you are not connected intimately with your soul, how do you expect to connect with other people? Even if you do, it's going to be very superficial, very surface level, because you're so on defense and thinking, I got to protect myself. I don't trust them. They're going to get 40% of the real me, and I'm going to keep the rest for myself. Why would you rob us of how great and how grand and how wonderful you are? Why would you rob yourself of allowing yourself the freedom to express yourself authentically? It's such a peaceful way to be. And so I can always be restored. And that's not a resignation of, oh, well, if this don't work out, I'll be okay. It is a knowing that I'm willing to take this risk and it's work. Sometimes we forget, and maybe nobody told us when we were younger, that relationships take work. It's an investment. It's an investment not just in you and the other person, but for all of us. When we look at communities that are thriving, it is because the relationships within those communities are thriving. And it doesn't just mean the romantic ones, it means the relationships that people have with themselves, their community, one another. That's a thriving village, as it says in here. That's what intimacy is about. Well, we don't require people to be fake, to be phony, and to not show every single version of themselves. You know, we've been talking a lot this year, based upon what we all experienced through the pandemic, about mental health and how we need to normalize the conversations around mental health. And if people are experiencing, a mental disorder or a mental illness, it's not something that we hide in the shadows like we used to. We need to talk about it. We need to affirm that it is happening because it is part of people's reality. So often, when people are feeling anxious or depressed, they feel like, well, that's the time for me to isolate. No, when you are feeling depressed and when you are feeling anxious, that is the time for you to find out where your connections of support are. Where can I go to express what I'm feeling? Whether that is with a therapist, whether that is with the people that you feel safe and sacred with. We also have this idea that we don't want to burden other people with our burdens. You're not a burden. You are flesh and bone. You are feelings and thoughts and circumstances and experiences. And as humans, we should be there for one another in a way, not because it gains us favor, but because that is what love does. It supports, it understands, it has compassion, and all of these other things that are on here. That's what love is. And it's beyond any risk of, well, if I share myself, somebody may take advantage. Yeah, they may. They absolutely might. Sometimes you creating the energy of being vulnerable is enough for you to receive what you need to receive. It may not come from the place that you expect it. And that has happened to me oh so many times in my life. And that is why I've learned to be open to where the love is coming from, because it comes in unexpected places. Sometimes it comes from strangers. But if I'm not open, how am I going to receive it? If I'm not telling the truth, how am I going to receive it? If I am not signifying that I am connected to how I am feeling, then how am I going to get my needs met? So no more of this pretending to be okay when you know you're not, because if you keep pretending, you can't receive what you need. And if you are in environments that do not support your growth, then you have to say, I got to get out of this environment. This is not conducive to my well-being. And I can't keep waiting for other people to get the memo that they have created a toxic environment. Oftentimes, they either are not aware, they're aware, and they don't care, or they're so used to chaos that peace is not even a thought. Some of us grew up in those types of environments where we don't know how to be at peace. Our body has never been at peace. You grew up in an environment of confusion and arguing, and everything was always loud, and you were always on guard, waiting for the next thing to happen. it can be very, very challenging to have a connection with intimacy because you just have never had it, which is why it is a requirement to develop it for yourself so that other people don't tell you what it looks like. Can you imagine someone else telling you what you deserve when you have to know that for yourself? And can you imagine being and investing in relationships over and over again where your needs are not met and it's okay with you? It's not okay. It's not okay. And so, one of the other ways that we can develop a strong sense of intimacy with ourselves is to feed our strengths and not the insecurities. We love to feed our insecurities. We love to create a story and keep it going. We love to look for the, as I said earlier, the red flags. If all you are looking for is red flags, that's all you're going to find. Trust me. And you're probably going to create some of your own. Every time you're in a relationship with someone, you're looking to see what they're doing wrong and you're commenting on it and you're feeding it and feeding it and feeding it. It's just going to keep growing and growing and growing and growing. And how often do we do that to ourselves? Where we're feeding the negativity. I'm not even going to allow myself to go there because I know what happens. One seed and shred of doubt is enough to dismantle an entire relationship. Just one little shred of doubt will have you asking other people, what you think about this? Do you think they're cheating? I don't know. What do you think about this? And the next thing you know, that little shred of doubt has blossomed into a whole forest where you're watching every single thing. I have developed and continue to develop a sense of security and strength in my being where I tell myself, God would not take me to a place and then leave me. So even if in this experience something happens that causes me to question myself, again, I can always be restored. And I know it to be true because it's happened so many times in my life. So many times in my life. And so we may also want to look at that 21 to 35 age range. What was your relationship with responsibility and believing in yourself? If you found it difficult to build trust in yourself, to build a sense of responsibility, maybe you had an experience where everything was done for you and you never quite learned how to figure out how to do things for yourself, or you had adult responsibilities for the majority of your childhood, and so you never developed a sense of how to connect with other people because you've been independent for a long time. As y'all know, I work in a childcare center. There are some extremely independent children in the center. I'm seeing 4-year olds who are so independent, they don't even want to play with other kids because that's not their reality. And so those two extremes could make it challenging for you, even at the age you find yourself now, even if you're beyond the age of 35, still challenged with how am I soft and gentle and affectionate and caring with myself? Do I think that's something that I'm just supposed to do for other people because I've been doing it for other people for so long? Or it was absent from my life when I was younger, so I don't know what that looks like. Again, some of us believe that intimacy is just a physical thing. Some of us think that vulnerability means I'm going to tell you all my business. Neither of those things are true. And I have a quote that I used to keep on my mirror. It's from The Way of Mastery, which is also a book. And it talks about, and it's in lessons similar to A Course in Miracle. Relationship was never meant to be a device for finding sources for love. Relationships were designed to be holy. If you are going into relationships thinking, this is where I'm going to get love, this is when I'm going to get care, this is when I'm going to get affection. And I'm not saying that we should not create those things in our relationships, if you think it is the source and the only source, then you become dependent upon other people, places, things. That thing could be your job, that thing could be your community, could be your family relationships, friends. If you think that those are the only sources for love, you're going to be challenged to have a great relationship with yourself. That has to start here. That's not something that we learn in our 20s and 30s because, again, we're learning and developing into adults. And it may be the first opportunity for us to see what we are made of, to really, really see ourselves. And if you haven't had a healthy relationship, or you didn't have a support system that had a healthy way of you developing a sense of self, then you might still be challenged with your relationship with intimacy with yourself. If you feel that life is leading you and then you're reacting and responding instead of you determining what your life looks like, then you may need to get a better relationship with intimacy. If you are the type of individual that starts things and never finishes, it could be because those projects, those experiences, those things are requiring you to go to places that you are uncomfortable going. And so you just stop. You know how we get all excited about something in the beginning and then we start to do it and then we lose interest? Because you may be challenged with keeping the fire going for yourself and only looking for external things to make you satisfied and happy. But I'm telling you, when that external thing stops being exciting, what keeps the fire going? So you start stuff and then you stop and you never finish. How many of us have started a book? How many of us have started a project? How many of us keep starting things and then we go to the next thing that's exciting and the next thing that's exciting and the next thing that it's exciting? Because we haven't learned how to connect with that feeling on our own. We're looking for external things to get us excited. If you have hopes, you have dreams, but you have no vision, because those things are different. I could dream things, I could hope to want to do things, but if I'm not putting any action behind something, that means there's no vision there. There's nothing connecting in here that's going to get you to the end of that dream, the end of that hope. And it could be because you didn't develop that when you were younger. That hunger that we have, that fire that is in within each and every single one of us. It is the thing that took you from crawling to walking. No matter how many times you fell down, no matter how many times people were picking you up and trying to discourage you, that thing, that instinct of, I am going to develop this skill. That thing that's within all of us to keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. If you don't develop a vision for yourself and you keep waiting for life to get to the point where then you get the things that you desire, then you get to live out your dreams. If you are not creating it because there's no vision, then you may have a issue with intimacy and expressing yourself and being clear. You might be afraid of risk. You might be afraid to go there. Sometimes you got to go there, no matter what the external stuff looks like, feels like. Sometimes you got to give up a lot of things. Your comfort, your familiar, patterns and habits. Things got to change. And that change happens internally instead of waiting for the right time, the right conditions. Those are external factors that you don't have control over. And so if you don't feel as though you have a destiny, just as the definition of intimacy says, it is a means of offering the gifts that you carry. If you are not clear about the gifts that you carry, then you also have an issue with intimacy. You are not seeing into yourself in a way that you believe it, that you trust it, and that you are willing to face any risk to see it come through. Look at baby. My baby says I'm speaking. I'm speaking what I know to be true. And I have to say that this man has been a great lesson in intimacy for me because I'm so used to being independent, because I'm so used to thinking for myself and thinking about what my needs are and how to meet them. In our relationship, there have been times when I've forgotten I'm not in this by myself. I said that I was committed to sharing with another person. And that means what affects me affects them. And so we just had to have a conversation about what are we willing to risk? What are we willing to show? What are we willing to speak about? Even if it gets really, really funky and nasty and heavy, are we willing to do that for the greater good of the relationship? Are we willing to tell one another, I don't like you today, and I'm going to tell you why? Or I don't like myself, and I need to tell you that. I am struggling with me, and I need to let you know, not because I want you to fix it, because I want you to see what it is that I am going through, and that I'm trusting that you're not going to misuse or take advantage of this moment that I'm having. I'm sharing parts of who I am with you because I trust God. And I trust that this relationship that we are creating and building and learning from is what we are here to do. And so it's not always going to be nice and sunny and happy. It's going to be real. It has to be real. There has to be trust. There has to be faith, integrity, and intention. Because if there's not, then we are not practicing the spiritual principle of intimacy. We may have gotten to, as Bell Hooks says, the level of affection. But like my good sis said, not that one, hold up. It's beyond the physical. It is beyond the physical. I haven't seen that man in a week and a half. If we haven't connected soul to soul, we weren't going to make it. Trust God always. And even in those moments when I cannot trust myself, then I will tell myself, I'm going to trust God because I know how I do. And so the questions again, what is your relationship with believing in yourself? What is your relationship with intimacy? What is your relationship with vulnerability? How authentic are you with you? And if you are in places, in spaces, in environments where you don't feel like your true self, it is your responsibility to do something about it. And you might need to look back at 21 to 35 to see what the lesson was. What did you learn? Maybe you learned how to pretend. Maybe you learned how to just go along. Maybe you learned how to lie. I know I did. I became a very good liar about what was going on with me. Everybody thought I was okay. And I learned how to lie about that. But you can only lie to yourself for so long before everything starts to fall apart. And as I said earlier, life is starting to lead you. You are not leading your own life. You're just waiting for the next thing to happen and then you react, and waiting for the next thing to happen and then you react. Do you know what that does to your mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical self? The waiting is not just waiting, it's survival mode, it's defense, it's nervous system on high alert because I feel like something is going to happen instead of I know who I am. I trust how I feel. So if something does happen, I know I can be restored. Fear is not how I make my decisions. Trust is. Love is. Because love is always going to be greater than whatever risk there is. We talk a lot about having faith. Oh, I've got faith like a mustard seed, and I've got faith in this. Do you really have faith in yourself? So much so, you willing to walk out and do whatever is necessary. You're willing to be who you are, or you're at least willing to discover who that is without everyone else's input or commentary. Take a look at what went on. Depending upon how old you are, you might have to sit down for a little bit and write it down. What was going on between 21 and 35 for you? What were the challenges? What were the lessons? What did your relationships look like? Were you the one that was giving, 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 giving? Or did you have this expectation of other people providing, providing, providing? Where was the imbalance in your family relationship? As you were developing into an adult, was your family still trying to keep you as a child? Or were your family's expectations that, okay, now you're an adult, now you're going to take care of us? Many of us have that story. Many firstborn or first generation college students, first generation um, great employment and career adults have that issue. If you are the one in your family that quote unquote made it, the expectation that now you're going to take care of everybody else can be very high. Can you imagine the burden of that at 21 to 35, where you are still developing a healthy, trying to develop a healthy sense of self? And you feel like, woo, I got me some freedom. And your family's like, no, you don't. Now you got to take care of us. The other extreme of that is you out of here at 18 and we're not going to support you at all. We got to create healthy balance of the two, where you are supported but also independent, but not at the extremes. And so, what is your destiny? What is your connection to what's going on in here? If you didn't know, the reason the indigo Coach Yolanda is there is because the corresponding energy center for this age range of 21 to 35 is the third eye. What was your vision then? And did somebody else come along and change it? Do you still hold that same vision? When people say, oh, I always wanted to be, did you ever stop to ask yourself why that did not happen for you? And are you still invested in it? Are you still connected to it? Don't lie to yourself. Those things that you developed are still within you. And so let's take a deep breath. I know we're over an hour, but we haven't been with each other in quite some time. So let's take a deep breath. Come into this right now moment where you are starting to think about the relationship you have with yourself above all others. The relationship you have with yourself is greatly correlated to the relationship you have with your higher power. And maybe that's the first question for many of us. What is your intimate relationship with a higher power, with a God, with spirit, with the universe? Are you hiding? Are you being authentic to the one to the power and the energy that knows you best, that created part of or all of what is talked about in the spirit of intimacy, the offering of the gifts that you hold within you? You trying to hide that from the universe? That's silly. Let's take a deep breath. And feel the energy of trust, of faith, of love, of connection with what is being held in your heart, in your head, and in your soul, in your spirit. Something that has been there long before you were ever formed in your mother's womb. There was a knowing. There was an energy that desired to be expressed through you and through you alone. That energy has been, will be with you forever and beyond. Are you speaking to it, connected to it? Do you recognize it as your guiding principle? Or has it become this voice that knits and picks at you from the back of your mind where you think it's safe, where you are not being truthful to yourself about the things that you desire, you dream, you hope, and you envision for yourself? Have outside external forces become so loud that you can't even hear that voice? And are you at a point in your life where you are ready to allow that voice to come to the forefront, to be a part of your choices, your decisions, and to be an intimate partner with your heart, your soul, and every relationship that you have created? Are you willing to recognize what relationships support that vision, that hope, that dream, and what relationships may not be supporting it? Are you clear enough with who you are that you can be clear enough with others to say, this is not part of the vision that I have for myself? I hold myself as being sacred. I hold my relationships as being sacred also. And therefore, I can no longer allow anything to diminish or disrupt the connection that I have with myself. I am ready to be vulnerable, meaning I'm opening my heart wider and wider and wider, knowing that opening my heart means that I'm going to think and I'm going to feel everything. But I understand and I affirm that my ability to feel all things is one of the greatest powers that I possess. No matter what I feel, I have the ability to be restored. Wherever there may be sadness, I can be restored. Wherever there may be disappointment, I can be restored. Wherever I may possess unforgiveness, shame, guilt, or any other emotion that keeps me from being connected to my heart, I can be restored. I am trusting that if it is in my mind, in my body, it is there to show me something that I need to see. And I trust God that as I begin to see and uncover and peel back all of these layers of protection that I have built around my heart, that I am getting stronger and stronger. I am ready to direct my life and not have life direct me. I am ready to be clear in my thought, in my feeling, and my behavior, no matter where I am, who is in front of me, behind me, or on the side, who may have something to say, who might criticize, who might judge, means nothing to me. I have to be authentic in all of my human interactions. As a sacred spiritual being, it is what I must do to be my true self, my authentic self. Knowing that when I am the truest version of myself, it's not just good for me, it's good for everyone involved because it may require others to be true to themselves and speak from a place of love and honor instead of fakeness and pretending. Hmm. There is a larger purpose and vision in being true to yourself. As I say often, we are part of a collective consciousness. And whatever you bring to the collective affects the collective. So if you are interacting with your fellow humans and you are not being true to yourself, it affects all of us. We have way too many individuals who are pretending to be something that they are not. It affects all of us and it robs us of our true value and our gifts. So if you know you have something within you that you are not sharing, I'm going to need you to stop and think about the impact that that has on all of us. It's not just them, it's not those people over there that think different than you, that look different than you, that pray different than you. It's all of us. We have a responsibility to not only believe in ourselves, but to believe in each other. And so earlier this year, I adopted the principle that everybody loves me and everyone agrees with me until I see otherwise. I'm not going into things with my defenses of ready to, fight or disbelieve anyone. If you tell me who you are, I have to believe you until or unless I see something different. I don't want to meet people with my guard up. I want to meet people with my heart open, knowing that that means that there may be a risk, but I can be restored. There's nothing that a man, a woman, or child could do to me that God cannot repair. So, what am I afraid of? There really is no risk when you think of it. Think of it in that way. All of the protection that I need, I have within me. I don't need other people to protect me. I love it when people support me, but the protection comes from in here because I know who I am. I'm sure about it. As sure as I am about anything else. And in those moments when I'm not sure, I just go to God and quite honestly say, I don't have it today. Send help in any form that you decide is good for me. And I trust that it has already happened. One of the things that I love about my beloved is that when I'm around him, my nervous system, whew, is so calm. I don't feel anxious. I don't feel like there's something we need to do, we need to say. We don't. For me, I'm not expecting anything from him. I don't require anything from him. And that's something that I had to create for myself in order to share with another person. And so I've said, well, what is it about this guy? It makes sense. It just makes sense because my body tells me it makes sense. My mind tells me it makes sense. My soul tells me it makes sense because I don't feel like I have to pretend. I don't feel like I have to adopt any personality. And I can tell you from the moment that we first met, I never worried about whether or not he liked me. Didn't matter. Still doesn't matter. I have to like myself and be authentic. Now we reassure one another. Look at him. Isn't he sweet? I love you too. But even if I never hear it again, I'm not creating an energy that's like, oh, you got to prove this, you got to prove that. He doesn't have to prove anything to me because I feel it. I feel it. And because I'm giving myself these things, I know what it looks like when I receive it from Him. And that's something that I've had all along. I just didn't know it. I certainly have always felt like that with my children. Now, there have been times where I'm like, those kids don't appreciate me, they don't love me. That was my expectations of them being greater than the love and the knowledge and the wisdom. I love these people, and these people love me. We're not always in agreement with things, but they are not the source of love for me. We share that, but they are no longer the source. I'm no longer looking at my relationships as the place that has to provide things for me. I provide it for myself, and then I get to share it with people who are also doing the same. And so I am still growing in my spiritual practice with intimacy. This past 2 to 3 weeks was really a test. I reverted back to some old behaviors of, well, I'm just going to take care of myself. I'm going to stay isolated. I'm not going to ask nobody to help with anything. I got it. I got it. I got it. And I recognized how that affected other people. I'm part of a collective. So I can't be selfish and only think about my needs, because I know that that's a survival tactic. That's a defense mechanism. When we feel vulnerable, when we feel like we're attacked or something has harmed us or hurt us, we revert back to those defense mechanisms. Well, let me, act like the turtle and go back into my shell. No. What I now know is in those moments when I feel attacked, that's when I need to open my heart even more, so that I do not allow it to close. I do not allow myself to shut down. So hopefully, as you look back at 21 to 35, and later this week on Wednesday, we're going to talk about Saturn return. Woo, child. For those of you 27, 28, 29, 30, for those of you who are beyond that age, I need you to journal and write about what was going on in your life when you were 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. What was going on for you? Not just the challenges, but what did life look like? Who were you in relationship with? Where were you having challenges? Where were you having successes? Just take some notes, because this Wednesday at 6 o'clock, we're going to talk about our Saturn return and what things went on. Blew my mind when I first recognized and I looked back like, oh my gosh, that was some of the greatest challenges in my life started to happen when I turned 30. My oldest turns 30 this year, and I'm like, girl, yes, Marissa, pure chaos. My oldest turns 30 this year, and I'm like, girl, buckle up, buckle up. So we'll talk about that phenomenon. We'll talk about ways that we can support ourselves based upon some of the impact of that phenomenon, because the pure chaos created an imprint. Whether you believe it or not, it created an imprint that you might still be dealing with no matter how old you are right now. And for those of you, you babies who are in that age range, we're going to pray for you. Hopefully, with some knowledge, it'll be easier for you than it has been for some of us. I can't make any guarantees, but the more information you have, the more able you may be to support yourself. I'll say it that way. Um, I'm so glad to be back with y'all. It really, and again, thank you for those of you who reached out when I was ill. I was having conversations with God like, if this is it, then I'm okay with it, because I was really in a lot of discomfort. And so I'm grateful that I've been restored. I'm grateful for those of you who reached out to look upon me to see how I was doing. And I'm grateful for your patience, because we missed, a couple of times I scheduled and I was like, not feeling good just yet. So thank you for your patience, your love, your attention, your affection, your care, your wisdom, the discipline that you provide for me because we are in relationship. I got to show up. We started this in January and I am committed to finish. So no matter what may be going on with me personally or professionally, we I'm committed. And so I'm grateful for your support in that. Again, if you happen to be, and thank you, my dear. Thank you, my dear. Thank you, my dear. If you happen to be in the Wilmington, Delaware area every fourth Tuesday, come see me for Sacred Womanhood. I would love to be in your presence. Rachel, oh, Rachel. Rachel said yours was last year and you're still feeling the effects of it. Again, the more information that you have, the more support that you might offer yourself. Please be gentle with yourself and not internalize everything as working against you or hurting you or harming you. This is stretching you. This is stretching you. It is letting you see parts of yourself that you would not see in any other way. Oftentimes, we will take the mindset of what's wrong with me? What am I not doing right? Or what did why me? Why are all of these things happening to me? If you can change your mindset from you are being harmed, similar to that Webster's definition of, being on defense. If you can change your mindset to what is this teaching me? What is this showing me? How is this stretching me in places that I'm going to need for my greater good? As much as you can, please, please, please be gentle and caring and loving with yourself in this age range. And for those of us who are of a certain age, I'm 52. One of the greatest things that you can do is to be gentle and supportive of young people. Some of us get to a particular age and we think we know everything and we think we have all of the wisdom in the world, and nothing could be further from the truth. And we are judgmental and critical of younger people, and we got to stop it. This whole generational thing, this generation is greater than that generation. We're all human. And we can't act like any one of us is better than the previous generation or the generation, coming up, you know, after us. Be gentle with young people. I'm so sick and tired of seeing the criticism and the judgment of this generation is lazy, this generation, in my opinion, is more open and loving than I have seen in a long time. And we who are of a particular age could learn a lot from this younger generation. So stop being so judgmental and critical because these babies are going through it. They are going through experiences that we never could ever imagine. And we created a lot of it. So get off your high horse, old folks, and be nice and gentle. And so, Rachel, and to those of you who are experiencing your Saturn return, we are going to hold space for you on Wednesday. I'm just grateful that the wisdom and intelligence that I have now, that I can use it for the greater good instead of pointing fingers at people and saying, you should be doing this or you should be doing that. You should be loving yourself. If nothing else, please love yourself. I'm so grateful to be back. We'll be back on Wednesday at 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time to talk about Saturn return. And then we're going to take our time with this age range. Typically we do 4 different aspects of the developmental stage. We might do 5, we might do 6. We got a lot of time. Um, and again, for many of us, this wasn't that long ago. So we might still be feeling a lot of the things that come up in this developmental stage. So hopefully I'll see you guys on Wednesday evening. Be kind to yourself, be gentle to yourself, hydrate yourself, evaluate your relationship with yourself before you start evaluating the relationships with other people, because whatever you're looking for in them, you better have in yourself first before you require other people to be giving you something that you're not even giving yourself. I love you. I love you. I love you. Have an amazing rest of your Sunday. Bye, y'all.